Okay, welcome back in, everyone.
Hooray.
Sorry for the trouble.
Except we lost all the questions. Oh, man.
Ooh, nasty. Let's see. Yep. Okay, folks. Well, we're resilient. If you want to repeat the questions, we'll start going through them again. Are you there, Bernie Stump?
Somehow I got dropped off.
Welcome
Yeah,
back,
everyone
Hans.
did.
We got bounced, and we're all coming back in. Les, I need you to start recording.
Yeah, everyone got dropped off, and now everyone's getting back in. So you're still good to go there, Hans.
All right.
So, we're so sorry, but that meeting bounce killed the chat window. If you could repost any questions you had into the chat, or text your any questions to 617-816-8766, and I will read them in. Okay, and Hunter has a single fork question, even though it's off topic. And Matthew, we are coming back to yours for sure. So Hunter, go ahead.
He may not be back on yet.
Oh, he's back. Hunter is. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yep. Fred Eisert said he replaced his torque tube years ago. It had minor corrosion. However, the diameter was undersized. The Piper spec on diameter seems impossible to achieve. As an IA, how do we determine the airworthiness if below diameter?
On the one chart where I showed my measurements, I posted the Piper requirements. Now here's a problem with the Piper. They have to do a mill run, and that's about 1,300 feet. Then it's centerless ground to the right diameter. Then they cut it with an abrasive cutoff saw. You know, with abrasive wheel. They slice the tubes in a 2-foot. Anytime you've either done it, cut any round thing with an abrasive tool, you know that it gets super hot. Cut. The middle, it goes quick, and then the end of the cut, it takes all that extra time to get out around.
Attention everyone, when you left the meeting and came back in, got unmuted, so we all need to mute them. Please.
Thank you, Malcolm. Yep. So just a quick background. When the meeting bounced, our host Pete Morse started converting, and so at this point, the work he was doing to mute all participants will now be handled most likely by Robert Klein. Fred Eisert, did that answer your question?
He was kind of broken up there, but it sounded like the tube is a little bit out of round. I mean, you know, I just look at the spec and Piper says minus 0.0002 inches. And I'm wondering if the tube ever met the spec to start with.
I mean, it did. Well, the tube in the long ground, the 12-foot, 55-foot piece of tubing probably was met the spec. But when you cut it with an abrasive wheel, a cutoff saw with an abrasive disc, you're going to heat the entry side and you're going to heat the exit side.
Yeah.
And that much heat warps the tube.
Okay.
That's the problem. What they should have been using is a carbide tip tripper blade A chipper blade, it does it cold and it just chips its way through the tube. That way it stays round.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Anybody with kids, you are going to need to mute again, I'm afraid. So from Chris's iPad, will corrosion-resistant bolts in the horn use galvanic corrosion? Chris, anything to add to that?
Yeah, when I installed the Aussie horn, I bought through Kristen actually a set of corrosion-resistant bolts for that entire assembly. Not only the horn to the tube, but the bearing blocks to the bulkhead. I'm just wondering if that reduces galvanic corrosion.
It should. It's not eliminate corrosion. Anti-corrosion bolts they're not corrosion free. How's that? But it should eliminate the corrosion.
I know you had mentioned 10 years is a good idea. I just wonder if that buys me more time.
No, if you've got corrosion bolts going through everything, I think you're fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
From Eric.
Kristen here has got a comment on that, if you've got a sec.
Go for it, Kristen.
I'm wondering if they've changed the Aussie horn, because I haven't done one in a couple of 3 years, but I've done a couple of them, and my recollection was that bolt was dash 34 length, where the regular Piper one was dash 33. And in the two I did, I managed to run down some AN 175 C dash 34As, which were the corrosion resistant, but it was not easy finding those. And I kind of thought the ones I'd sent Chris were the dash 33s, and I'm wondering if they had changed the Aussie horn to accept the dash 33s, which would have made more sense.
I've only installed one Aussie horn, so I'm not up to speed on bolt lengths. But if you think you had a hard time finding corrosion resistant bolts, try finding titanium bolts. That eliminates the problem. But as far as the dash length of the bolts on a Piper horn versus Aussie horn, I'm not up to date on that. And Eric, no.
I don't know, Kristen, but what you sent worked, so they were the right length.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're going to use the grade 8 bolts, is there a coating or electroplating that can be used to ensure that there's no corrosion on them? I mean, like if you use like the spray can of the zinc chromate, would that work, or do the electroplating, zinc chromate electroplating on it?
The grade 8 bolts that I used on the horn that was in the bath, it came with a shellac coating, and I just installed it. And when I took the horn out of the bath, there was a lot of crud on that horn. After bead blasting, those bolts are pristine.
Yeah, go figure.
Okay, interesting.
The original bolts corroded. The grade 8 bolts survived the 3% salt solution bath unscathed. Is that right, Hans?
Say that again.
I said the original bolts suffered corrosion in the 3% salt solution bath. The grade 8 bolts with their shellac coating emerged unscathed. Is that just to read it back? That's what you said? Yeah.
Remember on the horn that I showed that was all eaten up?
Yep.
Those were grade 8 bolts, and they look pristine.
Huh. Interesting.
Off to those. Where do you get the grade 8 bolts? Home Depot?
Well,
yeah.
No. There's a place here in SoCal called McFadden. It's a big hardware store.
Okay.
But you should
Do grade 8 bolts come in in various flavors, or is it just grade 8 is a grade 8? I mean, do they come with coatings or something like that?
No, it's just grade 8.
Okay.
The difference is they don't have dash numbers. They go by fractional increments. So to get one that has the full grip, the grip length that goes through the horn, you'd probably have to buy a 3-inch long, and then on grade 8 bolts, they usually have more threads than what you need.
Okay.
From Mark, actually, does that answer Eric's question?
One question for you, Hans, on the follow-up here. This is Kristen. What's the FAA's view going to be of sticking a pair of grade 8 bolts in the tail of the Comanche as opposed to AN hardware?
Well, all I'm doing is pointing out that in one test, a grade 8 bolt showed no corrosion at all. The recommendation is just use AN5s and replace them every 10 years, unless you go with a corrosion resistant bolt. You know, AN5C, I think it is.
So, okay, cool. This is going into some pretty interesting areas. Mark Sullivan had a question. In 2008, his Twinco developed a play at the stabilator tip. The bolt holes have become ever so minimally enlarged, but that caused play that you could feel at the stab tip. I still do not understand how the bolt holes could have become enlarged. Replace the tube with new old stock from Webco. 12 years later, they're still sound. Mark, did you want to add anything before Hank responds? Before Hans responds?
Yeah, I've often wondered whether or not there was any way I could have refurbished that tube, because now they're getting kind of precious. It wasn't back then. And it was perfect. After, 40 years, it was in perfect shape. Just for some instrumentality caused the bolt holes to get, I mean, you could barely measure the difference being off, but it was enough to cause substantial play you could feel with the stabilator tip.
Okay.
And so I got a torque tube sitting there in the hangar, and I often wondered, can this be reconditioned?
Okay, these are the bolts that go through the stabilator into the torque tube.
Correct.
This is a problem that's been discussed at length for a long, long time. And the concern is taking those bolts out often, like every 5 years. The bolt threads can actually broach those bolts if you're not careful. That's the problem. Those threads, when you tap those bolts out, because it's such a tight fit, the bolt thread has an opportunity to broach the hole and basically enlarge it.
Yeah, getting those bolts in, I mean, you have to be very patient because it's a very tight fit.
Yes,
and
they are.
The airplane, I bought the airplane from a guy who was a maintenance freak, and he probably did take that off repeatedly. So that explains how the play got started. And then I owned it about 8 years, and it finally got noticeable. Interestingly, though, that with a tiny amount of broaching of the hole,
Yes.
developed very noticeable play at the tip to the point it was obviously dangerous.
Okay. If it gets, how much play did you get?
I really couldn't measure it. You could feel it. If you grabbed the tip, and it was like you could feel it, just move a tiny amount, whereas it shouldn't move at all. It should be rock solid.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've gotten to the point now that, every pre-flight after a long flight, I go back and grab the stabilator, and I've done that in other people's airplanes, and I felt playing them. So it's not uncommon.
What sort of motion are you getting on that? Is it a lateral motion or
No,
longitudinal?
go up and down. Just go at the end of the tip, put your hand under it, and just lift, and just see if you feel play. and it'll feel like almost oil canning. It'll go click, 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 click. Just it's magnified dramatically at the stab tip.
Well,
But
the bolts don't really hold that way, do they?
I think they must, because I changed the torque tube and play gone. Torque tube, new bolts, play, and the torque tube that came out looks really good, and the bolts look really good. But it must be just a tiny amount.
Got me scared because Hans has got me scared because I pull my stabilators off every year to inspect the horn, and maybe I shouldn't do that.
That's not a good idea.
But I would recommend go back and take the stabulator underneath it, and you see if there shouldn't be any play at all. And
Right.
I remember in the 90s, I don't know why, maybe when I found this, I don't know when I first discovered this. I talked to Maurice about it before he passed on somebody else's airplane. He was the one that said there should be zero play. If you feel any, fix it.
Have you checked the rivets on the corner blocks inside the fuselage?
Oh, yes. I replaced those a long time ago.
Okay, so those are tight.
Yeah, those are good.
All right.
Good discussion. Just kicking in order, Tom just said this is off topic, but for anybody with Ray J turbos, the FAA just approved a life extension for 5 to 10 years with a commitment to a terminating action after in-service reports are provided when using Ray J specific PMA hoses. Press release to follow later this week. Thanks for the public service announcement, Tom.
So you have to, if you have the good hoses, would you have to have them recertified by Tom Langland's group, or have to replace them even though they're lifetime hoses?
Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. It'd have to be the Ray J PMA specific hoses. So any hoses you have on your airplane now would not qualify, regardless of whether they're Type D, Type C, fire sleeved, or anything like that.
Well, thank you for doing that. It's dumbest AD ever.
Yeah. Thanks.
What about the AD on the tail horn, on the rescinding that? Wasn't that a question?
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that in fact the dumbest AD?
Right.
Yeah, that one's probably the dumbest. The Ray J one's close, though. It's real expensive and real unnecessary.
Yep. I think we're going to be returning to the tailhorn AD. We are still continuing to collect information to bring to, and we'll bring it to the FAA when ready, and Hans is part of that effort. Hans, anything you want to add to that?
No, I'm working the problem, but you know, it's a lot of effort is going into that. The intent is to get a revision to the AD. We're not going to eliminate it. We're asking for a revision. And how far we can go is TBD.
Thank you so much. Another question from Larry. Can you just shellac your AN? Aren't grade A bolts less elastic than AN specs?
Well, I'm just saying, when I bought the grade A bolts, they had shellac on them. That's not important. The shellac is just a treatment. It doesn't do anything. The AN bolts and grade 8 bolts have different steel alloy, different type of steel that they use. And it appears to me that an AN bolt is more susceptible to galvanic corrosion than a grade 8. That's all I'm really telling you. And less elastic, well, it's modulus driven, so they both are at 27.5 to 28 million Young's modulus, so that doesn't change the elasticity. You got to think of Young's modulus. All right. Let's see what else we got. I think we lost a bunch of questions when everything went offline.
We did indeed.
Yeah.
So that's it. I'm going to go ahead and open the floor. Do other people have questions? You could unmute your mic and say who you are and then ask your question. Eric said, are you sure you don't know anyone who can pull 200 pounds on the yoke? Like when you're flying with your pet gorilla, for example?
Yeah, Hans, a longtime listener, first time caller here. You sure you don't know anyone who is strong enough to pull, say, 200 pounds on the yoke?
Yes, I know you can do it.
Yeah, geez. You know.
Don't you even think of trying to do that?
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, sounds like it.
Good evening, Hans.
For Eric, for everyone's benefit, Eric is my son.
I'm also the one who's flying 3-1 Yankee for the most part, so I make sure that the maintenance is kept up by the owner-operator.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, as another second generation Comanche pilot, I'm just curious, out of the remaining, we had, by the way, over 126 people logged on simultaneously at peak. I wasn't checking all the time, but it was a big group tonight. I have to say, it is clear we are all pilots because we managed to not step on each other when we were all unmuted, and all the background noise was incidental. So you can't get that out of most groups. Of the remaining 51 of us here, I'm just curious, how many of us are second generation? Because the Comanches are so popular, they seem to stay in families. I know if Marty Miesco's still here. Hunter, go ahead.
Third generation.
Ooh.
Just saying.
That's cool. Marty Miesco's daughter Marina soloed recently, so that's another one. All right, so
But my son also Robert Klein. I just wondered if you have any future presentations that maybe you'd like to give in a couple of months, and what topics it might be on.
Well, in a couple of months, we should be closer on the horn issue. That might be something. I'm open to suggestion though. What's important to everyone?
Yep.
Speed mods.
Oh, you want to go fast like me?
Nobody goes fast like you.
Well, the first thing.
Just at a.
The thing you have to understand is, I have most of the speed mods everyone else has, and they add up. I mean, it's not what is advertised, but they add up. The most speed I got out of the airplane is cooling drag, and that's something no vendor deals with. No vendor has any. Well, you can get a couple of, the Fristy cow or the Dave Pratt cow, and they do report some speed gains. The other thing is, and I reported this on the Delphi site, I have velocity stacks, and I produce more horsepower. And a velocity stack is, it's like a curved funnel. And what that does is, and I referenced my reference that I use for that on Delphi. And that is, imagine a bathtub or sink that has a sharp-edged exit drain. And when you pull the stopper out, you'll see that the water constricts. And the constriction is due to the sharp edge. If you put a curved, and the ratio is the radius of the curve divided by the radius of the hole should be 0.2. that'll give you 100% efficiency. And if you were to do that on a sink, you would get the full diameter draining that water. Right now, you only get 2/3. So the first thing I would look at is what, if you have a carburetor, that's a little more difficult. You've got a 250 there. Anyway, I have that on my engines, and I produce 12 to 14 more horsepower at takeoff than any other naturally aspirated twin. The second thing is you don't have cowl flaps, and you have a stock cowl with a stock exit, and I see you have a small nose tire. That's going to slow you down. And the way to fix that is, if you had a standard tire and you retract it, what's the gaposis of the tunnel against the tire? And now when you put the small tire in there, you have a bigger gap. And my feeling is you want to have something that closes that gap to what you had before. And because you're drawing too much air in, that cooling drag is air is coming into the cowling. It has to come to a stop. That means like going in a car at 120 miles an hour and you put your hand out in the wind, and you bring the air to a stop. That's a lot of force. And that's cooling drag. So what with singles, the problem is I would work on cooling drag if I had a single. Now the guy that, are you ready for this? Charlie Horton is a good friend of mine. He has a 400. He's got the fastest 400 in the country. His wife has a 180. He's been experimenting with her airplane, and she cruises at 160 knots in a 180. Charlie is a wizard at speed mods for singles. So most the 250s, 260, most of them, the standard speed I think is somewhere around 165 knots. Some of the tricked out ones I think go to 170. A fully tricked out single with everything taken into account, you might get it to 175, 178 knots, but that's going to take a lot of work. Not an easy job.
You've also mentioned that rigging is really important too.
Well, that's the first thing I do, is always the rigging. Rigging is first. Baffle sealing the cowling is second, and full retraction of the gear is third. If you don't do those three, you're wasting your time. And my rigging is such, I have a digital torpedo level. I'm within 1/10 of a degree everywhere. It's that important.
Hans, on a turbo twin 1969, what kind of speeds should I be looking at about 5,000 feet?
Well, turbo twins don't go fast down low.
Okay,
you're getting induction loss.
I'm finding that my friend's single Comanche 260 is actually faster than my twin.
Yes.
By about 2 miles an hour at 5,000 feet.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Okay, I'm not disappointed then.
Now, do you know how? Now, just to give you a data point, now I'm naturally aspirated. I don't have turbos.
Right.
But I cruise at 182 knots at 8,500.
What I've got to do is get this twin up high enough to where I can actually kick in the turbos and see what it'll do.
Exactly. And you can have no leaks of any kind anywhere in the turbo system.
The wastegate mainly is what you're talking about.
Yeah, and hoses and stuff like that. You can have
and this is Tom with Ray J. Really, it could be the hoses. It could be the alternate air door, the gaskets, seals. Compressor discharge box also has seals on it. Just a plan.
Tom knows those are all new.
What's that?
Tom, this is Bob. I bought all those parts from you a little over a year
hey,
ago.
Bob. Yeah. Awesome. Well, then that's not the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, could I sorry, go ahead, guys.
Real quick, just to answer your question, when the FAA, I have test data from the FAA back in the 1960s. They had to prove essentially all performance is as good or better than in all scenarios. That's why there's no different performance charts on any of the Ray J modified products. So yeah, there may be some kind of induction loss at some point, but it's essentially not even measurable in the eyes of the FAA. And I can assure you that if there's any kind of measurable difference that would affect any kind of performance, truly, it would have had different performance charts. So it'd be hard pressed to put any kind of value on it. They even did air pressure tests inside the induction systems and proved that there was no pressure loss. I think it was like possibly 0.1 inches, something of that nature. So that's just some data that I have for everyone.
Super cool.
Yeah.
I have a question from Joe, and this came up last week as well, which is with the passing of Bruce at S&B. And Joe, just bear with me for a second while I bring your question back. Is there any other option for repairing the web?
Okay, is that for me?
Sorry, yes, it is. And so the question, yeah, did that make sense? And Joe, do you have anything to add to that question before Hans responds?
Let's see, is it on the topic here?
It is really, I think, a question more about the strut housings.
Okay.
Is that, Joe, is that correct?
Trying to find it.
You won't. It was actually sent to me.
That's correct. The cracks in the web on the main strut housings, if they're only a 1/4 of an inch long, is there an option for repairing those now that S&B is out of business?
If I were to experiment, what I would need a cracked unit. I would then try to weld up the hole. Now the problem with welding is you lose the heat treat, but you get some of that back. And this is true with 6061 and a bunch of other alloys that are weldable, easily weldable, let's put it that way. I don't know how much you would lose in heat treat if you welded up that hole. And maybe there are means to determine heat treat using eddy current. So it would require a little experimentation, is the point I'm making. For example, if you weld 6061, which is a very common alloy, and the original compression strength is 32 KSI. If you weld it, you get about 28 KSI back, just due to the aging process. So you gain on one and lose on the other is the point. But, you know, is that enough to make a difference? I don't know. I've never really explored that.
I think I know of a member who actually does eddy current testing for a living, and I don't know if it's the right kind, but I suspect if this got put onto the list of to-dos and we could fund it, that we might get some contributions. It's a good question because it's an important area.
Yeah, I'm not a metallurgist, so you know, you're stretching me a little bit here.
We're working on that. Matthew, there is a link to Hans posting, on Delphi. Matthew, is your question related to the presentation that Hans just gave?
No, I was curious about the velocity stacks and the other speed mods that were referenced earlier, you know, in the continuing search to make my Comanche faster.
In fact, too bad I don't have a camera. I'd put this up on the screen. It's where's that book at?
Well, while you're looking, Hans, let me ask you this. I've got a commitment from Zach, and I will check with Charlie and Melanie, but they were extremely helpful to. So I was going to be flying the Air Race Classic in a twin Comanche with Helen Miller, JJ Miller's daughter, who's I think may still be our youngest twin co-driver. And Charlie gave us a whole tutorial on how to go win that race in the twin. So that's why I'm hoping he'll say yes. But everybody post or text or whatever on who you think should come in the Make Our Comanches Go Really Fast session, and we'll put it together, because clearly you all are like, make this session happen. That said, Hans, if you want, we will bring you back and we'll make sure that there's a working camera. I know Eric is committed.
Yeah,
So,
we'll get that up.
all
I'd
right.
like to make a correction. I have my reference here. The radius of the inlet divided by diameter is 0.2, not radius to radius. It's the radius of the curve of the curved inlet to the diameter should be 0.2. And if you do that, the flow coefficient is 99%.
Thanks. I'm assuming there's probably not too much that can be done there on the singles with the original cowling, right? The inlet is pretty huge.
Actually, for that, the Eagle cowling and is still available. And
Well,
that really is remarkable. I mean, the 250 I flew with an Eagle cowl was really remarkably fast and efficient. The knots to you, unfortunately, is not available anymore. And does anybody else know of other things? I wish Zach were here because he's sort of the single guy.
Yeah, Zach has a cowling that he's referenced on the Facebook group. I don't remember what it's called, but it's not the Eagle cowling.
Is it less than 15 grand?
I don't think there's such thing.
I know the Eagles are expensive.
I spent my money on the Electro Air, and avionics are next, so
Yay.
last.
That's probably a better way to spend it. A Lepesti cowling back when it was available was more than 15 grand.
I do have the three bladed prop that's supposed to go with that cowling, but previous owner never sprung for the cowl.
Yeah, the 3-bladed prop has a negative addition to speed, so you're actually hurting yourself there.
I know.
But boy, do you climb like a son of a gun.
I do.
It climbs really good.
Yeah. So Chris had a question. He said, since we're back on trunnions, why does the left side crack more frequently than the right?
I have no idea.
All right.
Yeah, I know you said it's the consequence of hard landings, but it would seem to me both sides would crack equally frequently if that were the case. I know it's come up on. Is there an echo there?
Well, okay. The right gear has a hole with nothing in it, and the left gear has the squat switch with a bolt through. So an open hole is going to give you more concentration effect than if you had a bolt in there. Especially if the bolt was tight. The whole idea is, if the stress concentration is 2, what can you do to reduce that stress concentration? And normally in joints, we add doublers or increase the thickness or increase the width. So one possibility to getting rid of is to, let me just speak freely. I would get some really good structural adhesive, clean up the area around the hole, and I would add a tapered in thickness doubler around that entire hole and bolt it up. And the idea being, I'm trying to transfer stresses to the tapered doublers, which is going to be like a tapered washer, using bonding and bolting to reduce the total stress. That's how we do. Whenever we've got a stress concentration problem, you add either thickness, a doubler, or something.
Cool. Hans, just 2 things. Mark Sullivan has offered you his twinkie strut with a tiny leak to test with. So that's a public service offer. It seems like there's a lot of interest. And then let's see, Dwight Kroom's got a question, but before I go there, it's 8:57. This meeting is being recorded and we'll be converting and posting. So the Q&A is here. We had sort of promised to stop at 9, but I think I just want to check with our hosts. Can you guys leave this up and then let the recording spool later? That would be for particularly for Bernie and for let's see who took over recording. Yep, Bernie Stump, are you there?
I am, and I'm the only one recording at the present time. Pete Morse is not present.
That's right. That's because he's in the process of processing so that we can convert to post the recording. Are you able to stay up a bit longer to allow this meeting to continue?
No problem.
Thank you very much. Okay, sorry everybody. I just, I know people want to be able to come back and find this data. And then just another quick public service announcement, because for some people the 9 o'clock drop dead is gonna need them to, anyways, the next the meeting next week, the Zoom session at the same time, is actually on a quick roundtable session on the status of autopilots for the Comanche. And so we have representatives coming in from actually Mark Sullivan for Trio. Eric Jones will be representing Garmin, although Garmin's Western Regional Sales Manager has committed to come and do a full session on what they're doing, and Trio likewise. So it's going to be the beginning of an autopilot session because that's so crucial for our type. And so, welcome next week. We'll be sending out another meeting invite. Just one other request. We only, oh, go ahead.
It's ending now, theoretically.
Oh, okay, that wasn't for this group. One thing that would do to help us, because so many of you registered for this meeting, we knew to increase the meeting attendance. We passed the hat and we increased the number of people that could attend because we had over 130 people. We haven't checked yet, but I was watching the attendance numbers. And so we knew to put in the extra money to raise the meeting limits because so many of you registered. If you could go to northeastcomanche.org and select fly-ins and then register, we'll know to continue to put in the extra money to make these meetings able to handle very large groups of people. And if you'd like, we'll also put you on a list so that you'll get reminders directly saying, hey, this is coming up, feel free to join. That's it for the public service announcements. Back to the Dwight Coombs question. He said, you mentioned cooling drag, and I have a 260 with a cool running number 5 cylinder and a hot running number 6, which is interesting because usually it's number 5 that's hot. I want to improve cooling on 6 and warm up 5 and reduce cooling drag. Who can best help me with this? Dwight, anything to add before Hans responds?
No, it's just been my puzzlement. The first 4 cylinders are excellent. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear, right?
But I've had trouble with number 5 being cool, and that's the only cylinder I've ever had to take off and have serviced. Number 6 will run almost 400 degrees in cruise at 65% power, and it's my best cylinder. But I'd like to get them all, in high 380s. They're like 380 area or something like that. I'm not sure what's the best, but my other cylinders are running like 380. 5 is running like 350 or less, and 6 is running almost 400.
Well, first of all, you need to understand cooling drag is a black art. On my airplane, I've done the baffle seals 4 times, trying to improve it and get it better. One thing I noticed when I had the engines overhauled, I had the baffles all cleaned up and powder coated, and they look sexy. The fit behind cylinder number 4, where the oil cooler is. Now, I know your oil cooler is up front, I believe, but the fit of that baffle on the engine side had a huge gap. And I mean, like a 3/8 of an inch. I said, wow, you cannot have leaks like that anywhere. The rule of thumb.
I don't. I have all tight to the cylinder fins.
Okay. Well, here's what I'd like to have you try. Turn off the lights in the hangar. Maybe have an assistant with a flashlight, and go around every part of that engine looking for holes. In other words, can you get light to come through? And
right, got it.
And whatever, if you find a hole, seal it. RTV, it's shut. That's the key.
Okay.
The second thing is, with the cowling on, look through the inlets and follow with a flashlight the sealing of the rubber seal all the way around.
Yes, done that.
Sometimes you get a little buckle, and it makes a little hole for the air. So it's just finesse. It's finesse and attention to detail.
Okay. As far as how the air flows, I know the guys at Tornado Alley had started doing some work about how the air flows, and they put some video cameras in on top of the engine and had little bits of string on everything, and they were amazed at how the air flows so much around the outside, towards the cylinder head, the fastest and the most, and then at the low pressure in the center, right back towards the spinner.
Yeah, I've done that too, and it's amazing. The air just turbulates around in there. Actually, it actually makes 2 racetracks. It circulates in a race. And the second thing is, the cylinders are considered 50% porous. They're like a sieve, but it's 50%. So as the air goes in, only a certain amount gets past the cylinders. And on the Comanches, the stock cowling lets way too much air in. That's one of the problems. And if you look at the Lopresti or Dave Pratt cowling, they don't have big areas going in. They have moderate area, where the stock Comanche has this huge hole that's shoving air in.
Right.
And that's going to be a problem. I started on a nose bowl long ago, with sitting in my hangar, of creating a single round hole nose bowl. People don't need the whole cowl. All they want is the nose bowl. And I never got around to finishing that. But that would be one of the first things, if I had a single one of you, the first things I'd work on is getting a new nose bowl.
If something like that was designed though, what's it going to take to get it approved?
You have to do some flight tests. You have to have thermocouples on your mags, your fuel pump, all your accessories, and stuff like that. Now, on my right engine, I have 10 thermocouples over there. It's not as bad as you think. How's that?
So the big thing is monitoring temperatures under different circumstances to prove that nothing's getting too hot.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's called equivalent level of safety. You start out with what you got, make measurements, and then you work on a new nose bowl, put it on, and you see what you got afterwards. And if you're equivalent or better, that'll work out to your favor.
Okay. Well, I'd like to talk to you about this. I'd like to talk about this maybe another time. I don't want to monopolize the time here, if you don't mind.
I think people are interested. Go ahead, Kristen.
I'm just going to point out that 400 CHT on a Lycoming is not a big deal. I mean, I've run engines from 0 hours to TBO, at those kinds of temperatures and never had a problem with it. So, I know it's a big deal for, savvy Mike Bush, but he's a Continental guy. That is pretty hot for a big bore Continental, but Lycomings handle those kind of temperatures. I don't get too excited until they're up over 104 1/4. Kind of where I'm at.
I agree. I think it's more that I want to try to warm up number 5. Number 5 has been my only trouble cylinder, and number 6 is the one that's hot is my least problem cylinder. So I agree with you. And you're right. The Continentals would start melting at like 380, I think. So yeah, stick with the Lycoming.
And she said, you must wear masks, you must.
Zach once said that Lycomings have this wonderful feature, which is that if they're going to start to have a problem, they kind of clear their throats a little bit and give you a clear sign. And then if you ignore it, they, might shrug and wiggle around a little bit. And then if you ignore that, then they'll punch you in the face, but they give plenty of warning.
Yeah.
When I went into manual, I had a cold cylinder and it wound up to be the probe. So don't skip over the obvious on this.
Yeah, I've switched the probes and it wasn't the probe. And that cylinder 5 is definitely running cold compared to the others, and it shows it when I've had to take it off and have some work done on it. But yeah, no, thank you. You're right.
All right. Just a voice from, like I say, I kind of got tricked on this past annual on that one.
Yeah.
It's a relief, isn't it, when you find out that it's a bad probe?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. By the way, Steve Ells, who is the person that that Mike Bush acknowledged as one of his mentors, is going to be presenting on determining your engine health and condition-based maintenance. So he was on earlier, I think, when we had that meeting bounce. He lost it, but that will be a really, really interesting presentation. Steve is just really well known in Comanche circles as being a take it to the bank kind of guy about Comanches and Lycomings.
In case it's wrong, not just in this, but in other of those infections as well. Yeah, Christian.
Well, I think we're running out of questions.
Think about this, if things were
So,
in action today, the big playoffs in both the National Hockey League
maybe
and
we'll get questions later on. But anyway, I think we want to cut this off now.
but professional baseball.
Okay.
I agree. Thank you so much for being here. Is Bill Kniff still on?
Stadiums and production and payroll with us.
Thank you, Hans.
Okay.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Hans.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Americans are going to get this.
Thanks, Hans.
What might it look like?
I think it's
Thanks a lot, Hans. That was really good. Appreciate it.
Major League Baseball this summer.
Thanks, everyone.
Plans,
Thanks for being here, everybody.
empty stadiums.
Thanks, CJ. Thanks, Hans.
Thanks for putting on a good presentation.
And what the public health situation is, and us reaching.
We're lucky to fly these birds. Robin Touchlick, nice to see you. Thanks for being here. Nigel, welcome. Thanks for coming.
CJ and Hans, thank you so much. It was really great.
Stephen Merrill Shepherd, there is a group of people real interested in doing interiors. You may get roped in next. Just warning you. Marty, thanks for being here.
CJ, here we go.
Yep, sorry, say again?
Now I get to see what you look like. You finally get up in there. Yeah.
Sorry, I have really limited upload bandwidth, and so I killed the video because people weren't able to hear me earlier. We were doing a test run, and killing the video meant my audio channel was able to, use the space. Murray, I see you again too.
Yes, I'm here. My first time, so I appreciate it. I really enjoyed it. Thanks all. Goodbye.
Thanks for being here, John. Appreciate your time.
Hey, Bernie, I'm going to see if I can get you and Les and me together and have a post flight on this. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe the day after, just to go over some of the things that came up.
We'll be doing an after action review. Good deal. Jeff Gaskell, thank you for being here. Nice to see you.
Good night, all.
Good night, Robert. Thank you. And Robin, say hi to Nick. If you can hear me. All right. Well, John, thanks for being here. Guess I should go do chores, Murray.
Yeah.
We were trying to make sure this worked, so there was a lot of last minute hiccups where we were just running around trying to make sure we could handle this number, and I still have
No, it's great. You got
heavy lifting.
well more than 100 people here. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yep. No, it looks like we had over 130 at peak, and we'll know the numbers. The Zoom thing sends a report of who uniquely joined, but we're just happy that the information is getting out there. If y'all have suggestions, by the way, we're just taking orders, and then we're doing our best to put whatever people want to hear about together. So feel free to drop a note either into the chat window before it gets saved off, or send us an email.
Well, thanks for another good presentation, CJ.
We'll see you next week on autopilots.
All right. Yeah, that'll be interesting.
I think it will be. That's been such a hot topic for so long. I can't wait to hear it myself. I don't know what they're going to all say. But apparently they've got that 260C in that Garmin's using, and I just heard from an engineer at Garmin that his 260B is getting pulled in for some additional testing because the 260C doesn't have the torpedoes on the stabilator. It just has the eggs on the rudder, and they need both to be able to test it V&E. And then I guess the 400 is in with Genesis to look at the next S-Tech. Martin was here earlier, and Trio is very much intending to do the twin Comanches in particular, which is so critical because nobody else is addressing them, and they're such naturals for it. So
yeah.
And then we'll have Mitch Hobart, who's been installing autopilots, and Greg Peel, who's been designing kits and has the STC for the PA-28. And I'm trying to reach the folks at Autopilot Central, because the other great option for autopilots is the old Ultimatics and Centuries. They still work, and anything that still works after 50 or 60 years in my book is a good autopilot to consider. And they can be fixed. So not everybody knows that. Well, folks, I guess I'm gonna ring off. Bernie, Dad, thanks so much for letting this run late and recording it. We'll put your recording and Pete's together, and guess we'll have a two-part download on the website. You're still muted, so you'll need to unmute to respond.
I believe we can combine 2 or more MP4s into one and put them all on the website as one file.
Oh, cool. That would be good. The one thing I was thinking is the fact that we have 2 files might actually end up being helpful in a way because it marks the gap where everybody gets dumped off and then something like 60 people come back on. Since it's just us now, does anybody have any idea what might have knocked down the meeting? It corresponded with me getting a note from Zoom to upgrade. I don't know if that had anything to do with it.
I have no idea. It just stopped. So we rejoined and came back in.
Yeah, but we lost half our participants. At our peak, we were at 126, and we rejoined with about 55, 60. And I got a bunch of texts from people going, "Hey, the meeting went away." And so we don't want that to happen again. And that's why I'm wondering, just sort of polling the group hive mind. Does anybody know what could have happened?
My guess is it had something to do with the fact that we had 2 meetings scheduled and I still had a device looking at the other meeting and telling people to come to this meeting. And,
yeah.
And because of that, and because that device stopped, I restarted that device, but I appear to have interfered with this one.
Oh, interesting. Well, it could be. Alrighty. Well, I guess we'll take it down now. Good night, everybody, and thank you for being here.
All right. Good to see everybody. Good to see you, Hank.
Yeah.
You.
And if anybody has suggestions for process improvements, send them on. We'll try to make them happen.
Sure.
Or invites. All right. Bye all.
Bye.
I'm not sure that's the case. I don't think so. Mm-mm. I am. In general, I think so. The fact there was one glitch, which was Hans trying to share his presentation didn't work, and so Pete, he went through the first like 10 slides with no prezo. Yep, exactly. Perfect. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But you hit Control Alt A. Yep. You raise your hand. So we need to tell people that. We need to tell people that we're putting it on. Yeah. Mute. And we need to also tell them that when we finished it,